Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Professor.
Yeah, hi, good morning, Kazuki, and good morning, Yang. How's everybody else? How are you, darling? And Leslie, how are you? Leslyn, I'm sorry, Leslyn. Randy, Steven, are you guys there?
Yep, in
Hi,
good shape. How are you, Professor?
very good, very
Good
good.
morning,
You're in good
Professor.
shape, right? How are you, Randy? Um, Glad to hear that someone is in good shape. I'm sure everybody else is in good shape.
Considering.
Yeah. Um, well, so I see like six people here. Six people, and I don't know. Is it because of the weather? I see very relatively low attendance, but let me check how many people are in the. I have two threads of my own, so that means, that means seven. I have seven people here. Uh, Makila and also somebody. Oh, yeah. Uh, yeah, sure. All right, and I don't see Leslie's thread. Leslie, are you there, Leslie? Leslie? Okay, I'll have to how do I'll send the chat message. Okay. Leslie, please don't forget to report attendance in in this forum. The discussion. Okay. All right. Okay, so we need to we need to speed up a little. We need to bring it up a little. To where was I? You did. Let's see. Leslyn, I don't see your name here. This is what I'm talking about, right? Leslyn, can you see it? Mm, oh, okay. But now you know, okay? And if possible, I don't know this from Leslyn is in and out. For
I'm
the
here,
past
Professor.
two,
I
yeah,
was not
yeah,
able to
hi.
hear you.
Okay, Leslie, for the past 2 days, you were marked present because I remember. if I if I didn't notice, but you cannot just rely on my memory because the names that appear on the in the collaborate, uh, it's not physical. It's not physically there. Once the session is over, it's gone. So don't just rely on my memory. Uh, so you should always, for the past 2 days, I remembered that you were there. So I marked you present, but you will need to, because this is physical. This is, yeah, I see you there. So this is physical record. Don't worry about past 2 days. I marked you present. Okay? I marked you
Okay,
present.
thank you.
You're welcome. And if possible, please talk to me, because it's kind of, it's kind of confusing and hectic, to just, switch between the, screen and the chat box. So if possible, what is that? Are you all speaking? Only I was speaking. And then let's see. So as I said, we need to bring it up, bring the speed up a little to stay on track and to stay on schedule. So basically, we wrapped up everything about the. Oh, it wasn't everything. Actually, if you have time later, we can come back and talk more about these two columns, column J and K. But for now, we got what we needed to do. We used, we found geometric average by formula, and the formula is, I can rewrite the formula somewhere here, but it's going to take time. But I showed you the formula on. This is the formula for finding geometric average. But also on Excel, we have something called Excel's built-in function. And if we use Excel's built-in function, see if you click on this, f of x, that means function of x. So that's function. The dialog box will open up, and the dialog box will ask, basically, the dialog box will ask you what type of function you want. And basically, it is by default, it will show you it will show you the list of most recently used functions. But what we're looking, if it is not here, what you're looking for is financial category. So you go there, and maybe it's not. It's just let's go to math and trigonometry, or just all. And what we want is geometric average. So scroll down until you find G. And when you are there, G, there is a function called geomean. There is geomean. It means geometric average. So select that. And then here, when you use geomean, we need 1 plus G or 1 plus R. Okay, so that's why I had this column G, and this is in other words, this is a gross growth rate, and you highlight all of them. Hit OK, right? It gives you already, right? That's but you have to subtract 1, because this is then it's not only net 11.57%, but it's like 111. I mean that, because that's the result. That's the gross growth rate, right? So if you subtract too many digits, we don't need all of that. First, give it percentage, and it automatically rounds it up. But we need at least 2 to 3 decimal places, at least. Okay. So 2 to 3 decimal places. Increase decimal. Okay. I'm gonna I'm going to bring you, I'm going to remind you of this later because there's don't let Excel automatically just round it to an integer because there is a significant difference if you just let it round it up or round it down, round it off, it's going to have uh, sometimes that rounding difference um, would result in a significant rounding error. So you should always use at least 2 to 3 decimal places. Okay, so I got the same result here. Yeah, that's what I didn't use geomean there, but so um, when we have time, we can come back to this, but for now, we're done with this example. So we're now moving on to the interest rates. Why are we talking about interest rate suddenly out of blue? Now think about it. We were talking about the return on investment, and I told you return on investment can be from any holding period, right? The holding period for any asset or any investment can vary. That's why we need to annualize it, right? But then when we are um, dealing with return on investment, um, investment by default, by definition, investment assumes taking risk because there is no investment without any risk, right? You buy stocks, you're taking a risk. You buy bonds, you also there's the risk of a bond is quite limited, very and the risk is really relatively very small compared to the risk of the stock, but still there's some risk. So if you think about it, is there then what is the investment that has the lowest risk? Is there an investment that has the lowest risk? Yes, yes, of course, there's an investment that has the lowest risk. Uh, what is it then? A bank interest rate. Think about it. Bank interest rate is the return on investment with the lowest risk. But then, um, what is then? You might wonder, putting money. So putting money in the bank, is that investment? Uh, yes and no. First of all, you can't really say that it is an investment because there is no risk, right? But then, as the saying goes, there's an old, there's a well-known old saying that says, the more risk you take, the more the return. The higher the risk, the higher the return. Isn't that right? That means if um, that also means that if there's no risk, there's no return. Isn't that right? Hmm? If you don't take any risk, then the return will be very low.
Very.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that right? And think about putting your money in the bank. Um, and I'm talking about the savings account, right? If you put your money in the savings account, what kind of interest rate do you get on the savings account? Hmm?
Very low.
Very low, yeah.
Well,
But exactly how low? Can anybody give me an example?
less than
But
1%.
huh?
Yes,
It is what?
less than 1%.
Less than 1%. Less than 1%. That's for sure.
The APY
Um,
it's 0.01 on a bank account, bank savings account.
yeah, it's almost maybe you're talking about okay. Today's January 5th. Yeah. Who said first, who said very low? Who said very low?
Stephen did.
Stephen, yeah.
It depends on
Stephen,
whatever the Fed funds
yeah.
rate is, whatever the target rate is. The banks will
Right,
adjust
right.
accordingly.
But you got 0.5 point for that. I mean, it's we can expect
Sure. Yeah.
we that's quite unexpected answer. So I would give you 0.5. That was an anticipated answer. That's what I'm saying, right? Not an unexpected, but an expected answer.
Right.
And who said less than? Who said less than 1%?
Me, 一样
Okay. All right. Yang. Yeah, I'll also give you 0.5 for that. And who said like, who said 0.01%? Who said
Me,
0.01?
Andrea. No, that was me,
Who?
Leslin.
Leslin. Okay. Leslin, you said 0.01. Okay, I'll give you
Yeah, but in 20,
0.5%. Hmm?
no, I was also going to add that in 2022, it's 0.11% now.
0.11%. Okay. Yeah. So I was going to say it would be roughly about 0.1%. I mean, on the savings account, 0.1%, right? Not 0.01, 0.1%. And the banking is a very competitive industry. And you understand that's someone said APY, right? I think it was Leslie, right? Who said APY?
Yes, Professor. That was me.
Yeah. Uh, so that means annual. All the interest rates are basically annual, right? It's an
Yeah.
annualized rate, annualized. So if you put like $1,000 in a bank, right? 1% will be $10, right? 0.1% will be $1 a year. I mean, you're earning $1 on $1,000 in a year. So it's that low, right? Currently. And someone said, it depends on the Fed funds rate. Yes, because the Fed funds rate is low. Uh, uh, the average, rate that the bank pays on your savings account is very low. But it wasn't always like this. It wasn't always like this. Back in like 1984, 85, that was a time when interest rate was even as high as 15%. And even, this 0.1% interest rate is not normal. It was like this. It's been like this since 2008, since the financial crisis of 2008. Interest rate was held at this low level. But again, average interest rate, historical average, as long as we can have data, and we have data, uh, uh, a written physical record of interest rates, right? The data that can go back as far back as like 100 and probably 120 years, 130 years, or 50 years. But over the last, like 100 years, the average interest rate has been about 6%. Okay. So compared to that, 0.1% is exceptionally and unusually extremely low. And it's been like this since like 2008. And banking is a quite competitive industry, right? So you can shopping around in banking doesn't make that much sense. I mean, still it makes sense because even if I mean, if you shop around for savings account, there's no difference. I mean, one bank doesn't offer significant better rate than another. But savings account is not the only way you can save money. There is something called CD, right? Certificate of deposit, which is also a kind of savings contract. This is actually savings, product, right? A savings account, but it's a contract. During the contract period, you keep the money in the bank, but you don't have any liberty of withdrawing money during that contract period, right? Savings account, if you put your money in the savings account, you can withdraw anytime, but they don't allow, savings account doesn't allow frequent withdrawals, but still they allow some, like 2 times a month or 2 withdrawals per month or something like that. Still there's some liberty. I mean, it's not a binding contract. You can withdraw the entire amount at any point without any penalty. But with CD, it's a contract. So if you withdraw money, that's early termination of the contract. So there's penalty. But basically, if you put your money in the CD, that's the money that you don't need to withdraw anytime soon. So then, generally for like 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, generally at least 1 year, at least 1 year. But think about it. If you want to benefit from the interest they pay, and the interest rate is always annual, right? So you have to keep it there for 1 year at least, and then you will realize the promised APY. APY is APY is the compounded result of APR. Okay, I'm gonna get to that later. But for 1 year, to keep it there for 1 year, APR would practically be the same thing as APY, unless the compounding is, more frequent than once a year. But the point is, yeah, if you put these days, if you put your money in the CDs, probably you might be able to get something like 0.8 per 1 point something 1 point something 1 point 1 but anyway, between the banks, this rate on the CD may be slightly different, and but still that difference would not be that significant. But still, if one bank pays 1.25 while the most other banks pay just 1%, it's still better, right? So the point here is, now let's think about it. If you put your money in the CD or in the savings account, is it risky or is it riskless?
I think it's risky because if you need money and you need to take it out, and you take it out and break the contract, or
you broke up,
if you
right?
breach if you breach the contract, then they're going to take
But it's
away.
well, yeah. you pay a little penalty, but the penalty is basically not your principal. The penalty is not your principal. The penalty is basically foregone interest. They won't pay you the interest,
Well,
right?
if that's the case, then I guess it's riskless. It's not taking
Yeah,
any risk.
it's if ever it is a risk, that risk is from you, not from them, right? Isn't that right? So as long as you don't breach the contract, then it's okay. I mean, uh, as long as you don't breach the contract, there's no risk. I mean, because uh, risk in this case, risk means what? In
Losing
this case, risk. Hmm?
money.
Oh, risk of losing money. Okay. And who said that?
Yang Sang.
Okay. Ian. All right. I'm going to give you another 0.5 for that answer. Yeah. And can someone put, so this is the risk of losing money, but can someone put it in another way? Can someone put it in another term? What is, if you lose your money, why would you lose your money? Because if you lose your money, it's because the borrower failed to pay back.
Pay back.
Isn't that right? Isn't it right?
Yes, default, right?
Oh yeah. That was what I was looking for. If the borrower defaults, right? Okay, you said that. But basically, you got the point for that. So I'm not gonna add any more points for that. If someone said, default risk, right? That person would have got that 0.5. Yeah, look, think about it. You probably haven't realized it. You probably haven't realized it, but when you are putting money in the bank, right? You are passively lending money to the bank. So you're passively becoming a lender, and the bank is passively becoming a borrower. Isn't it right? Hmm? Bank, the term borrowing has always a negative connotation associated with it. So borrower being sounds like borrower sounds like a bad thing, isn't that right? Borrower sounds like a bad thing. Borrower sounds like and when you borrow money, it sounds like the there's a little like a negative connotation there. It's like if you're borrowing as if you're on your knees begging for a loan. There's that image. There's that. That's why there's some negative connotation associated with the word borrowing. But actually, if you think about it, borrowing and lending uh, can happen passively. You can actively seek to borrow. For example, when you are trying to get a loan from the bank, you are actively borrowing, and in that case, the bank will be evaluating your credit worthiness. They will look into your credit history, credit score. They will have to look into your assets you have, or wealth you have, or what is your income, what is your whether you have a permanent job, or all these things. They will have to whether you have existing loans, or all of these they will have to evaluate. So you're being examined, you're being scrutinized, you're put into that position, and they are examining you, evaluating you. So it's certainly not a very pleasant thing, but what can you do? You are the borrower. So obviously, when you're actively borrowing, that is the image that is associated with the word. But then sometimes you become a borrower passively or become a lender passively. And this is exactly the situation. If you suppose you are saving money with the bank. Bank is borrowing you passively. Bank becomes the borrower passively. You're becoming a lender passively, right? So, in a way,
But
when you
Professor, excuse me,
Mhm,
sorry.
mhm,
But
mhm.
even though they're just using the money to balance out their revenue books, that's still considered as them borrowing that money?
You borrow money to balance out whose revenue?
The the bank.
Oh yeah, even look, the bank um uh it's not the revenue, it's not revenue. First of all, from the bank's perspective, um
I
or
mean their
any
cash
deposit,
reserve. Hmm.
yeah, their cash reserve, right? And still, of course, in under any circumstances, when there is a deposit that they are taking, they are passively becoming a borrower because that creates an obligation for them to pay back, right? Any the bank, it becomes bank's liability when they accept deposit. It becomes bank's liability. Also, they use that deposit. If you put $10,000, right, in the bank, it becomes bank's liability to you, but $10,000 also becomes bank's asset because they can they don't just keep it as uh, cash. They can use that money. They can make a loan up to another $10,000. Right? Think about it. They take $10,000 deposit from you, and they will loan it. They will lend it out to someone else. And when they lend it out, think about it. When they take that deposit from you, they will pay you some interest, and they will pay you like that that crappy 0.1%, right? But when they lend it to someone, they will charge like a 5%. So it's your money, and then they use your money, lend it to someone, charge 5%, and then from that they pay you 0.1%. So bank will keep 4.9%, right, to themselves or for themselves. Makes sense? That's basically the source of revenue for the bank. Make sense? That's the source of revenue for the bank. But yeah, in any right, this is straightforward, lending and borrowing. And but again, back to the question of default. The risk we are talking about is default risk. So when I ask the question, right, uh, if you put your money in the bank, is it risky or riskless? It is riskless, right? It's riskless because um, unless the bank defaults on their obligation to pay you back, right? Of course, when I said putting $10,000 in the bank, you can put it in the savings account or you can put it in the CD. If you put it in the CD, this is, as I said, it's a contract. So you cannot touch it for 2 years, let's say, for 2 years. They will, but 2 years later, uh, they have an obligation to pay you back the $10,000 with 5% interest rate compounded for 2 years,
Understood.
right? Yeah. So that is, that is why it is a um, uh, uh, riskless. That's why it is riskless. Um, so some people might say, don't the banks uh, do the do the banks never fail? Uh, yes, they can fail sometimes, but look, if there's something called FDIC. Anybody heard of FDIC? Because when there's a where you may have seen some bank commercials on TV, and there at the end there is a fine line. They read the fine line very fast.
Yeah, that's a Federal Deposit Insurance Cooperative.
Right, right. FDIC stands for Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. What is that? That's an insurance company for the commercial
Yeah, they
banks.
insures the deposit.
Right. So they insure the deposits up to $250,000, right, per account. So, and so the banks, all the commercial banks, are basically members of FDIC. And if they are not members of FDIC, they won't be able to compete in the business, because all the other commercial banks, if all the other commercial banks are FDIC member, and if you're not, who's going to put their money in your bank, right? There are investment banks or some financial service institutions which are non-commercial banks, and they don't have to be FDIC member, right? But as long as it's a commercial bank or retail bank, they have to be a member of FDIC. Otherwise, so if they are insured, then your money is insured up to $250,000. So even if the bank fails, you'll get your money back. Then so it's riskless. Then the question is, will you get the interest as well? If they are FDIC, and if your interest falls, principal and interest falls under 250K, why not, right? So so the answer is yes. It's riskless, right? Return your money in the bank is your. The question is whether can you consider this as an investment? And I said yes and no at the same time. First, we can consider that as an investment because at least your money earns something, although it is just 0.1%, right? If this wasn't put into the savings account, it doesn't even earn 0.1%. If this was put in, if you just if you kept it in the checking account, it wouldn't earn anything. If you kept it under your mattress, it won't earn anything. But at least it earns 0. But again, if you put it into a CD, you would probably earn. I don't know what's the CD rate these days. Probably slightly around 1.25 or. And someone has any better idea? Someone has any better idea about the CD rates? Anyone? I heard someone trying to say something. And my savings account somehow, I've checked it, pays about 0.8%. So, but then think about it. So you put your money in the CD, and it earns, let's say, 1.5 to 5%. It's still a very low return, very meager return compared to historical average, but still better than nothing. And this is risk-free, completely without taking any risk. You're earning like 1.25%, right? But then the next question is, so it's better than better than not putting your money in the bank, right? But my other answer was no. Why no? I mean, as the saying goes, the higher the risk, the higher the return. Therefore, the lower the risk, the lower the return. So it perfectly fits that criteria. So why no then? Another reason is, so if you get 1%, let's say you get 1% on your CD, but then what is the reason you're investing or putting your money in the um, basically, if you put your money in the CD or in the savings account, you are not directly investing. You're just getting that fixed rate. But then who's investing? The bank will be investing that money. The bank is using that money to make a loan or to put it into the stock market. So whatever the risk is associated with that lending or with that stock market, with putting money in the stock market, that risk the bank is bearing. Sometimes the bank may lose your entire $10,000, but they still owe you 1%, right? And your principal of 10,000. So 1% of 10,000 is only $10. But the point is, so it's still an investment, right? So you can, why? Because even if you're not directly investing, it is intermediated. So you are investing vicariously through the bank. And then the bank is keeping most of it. And you are getting only the fixed return. But still, that can be considered investing. But the reason I said no as well is, why are you investing? What is the reason that you're making investment? What's the reason? Maybe there are some people may be very ambitious. You want to grow your money by you want to grow your money by 300% or 200%, or you want to double your money in 5 years. That's 100% growth, right? Doubling your money, that's 100% growth. That's just over 5 years. That's a very ambitious goal. But some people may have that ambitious goal, or some people at the other end, some people may simply want to preserve the purchasing power of your money. Simply preserve the purchasing power of your money. You see what I'm saying? In other words, suppose you have $10,000 today, and if you don't put it in the bank, next year it will still be $10,000, but then between now and next year, what if there is an inflation? And most of the times, growing economy, inflation is inevitable. Inflation sounds like a bad thing, but no, actually, inflation is not necessarily a welcomed guest, but it's it's an inevitable companion to a growing economy. An economy that's growing is inevitably will have some moderate inflation. So think about it. What's a moderate inflation? I'm going to get to that later. But let's say there is a 10% inflation between now and a year later, right? Now is called time zero. Okay. Keep in mind. Let me use. Why am I not using the whiteboard? Okay. All right, let me put it here. Time 0, that's now, of course, and time 1, and that's 1 year later, and principal, right? You have 10K. And first of all, interest rate, inflation. Suppose interest rate is 0. In other words, you don't put it in the bank, or even if you put it in the bank, inflation is 10%. What does that mean? I mean, if interest rate is 0, you put it in the bank, 1 year later, it will still be 10K, right? Nominally 10K, but everything becomes 10% more expensive 1 year later. So what will be the actual purchasing power of 10K? Anyone? Can anyone tell me? I mean, one thing you can tell for sure is that if there is inflation, 10% inflation, right, between now and time 1, so the real dollars, this is nominal dollar, right? Nominally you will still have 10K, but you can tell 1 year later, you cannot buy as much as your 10K cannot buy as much as what 10K could buy today. Make sense? Everyone?
It would be less, right? Understood.
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's going to be less. It goes without saying. You might think, oh, you can buy 10% less. No, it's not exactly like that. It will be roughly about 10% less, but to actually adjust for inflation, you will need to divide it by 1.1, and whatever it may be, it will be like yeah, it will be slightly less than 10% less. In other words, 9,090. So in other words, if there has been 10% inflation, 1 year later, your nominal $10,000. Nominally, it will still be $10,000, but in real purchasing power, it can only buy, your $10,000 can only buy as much as what 9,090 could buy today. So the purchasing power of money is eroded by inflation, right? The purchasing power of your money is eroded by inflation. So think about why I said this. First, I said, uh, putting your money in the bank, it doesn't give you very good return, but still it can be considered as investment. And that, even if it is 1%, it can be considered return on the money, but that's riskless return on the money because there's no default risk. And then just like the old saying, the higher the return, the higher the risk. I mean, the higher the risk, the higher the return. So for riskless investing, if you get even 1%, then that's not that bad. But so it can be still considered, but it cannot. If it is considered as investment, it will be a very poor investment. Why? Depending on your goal, some people have very ambitious goal in investing. They want to like double their money in 2 years, 5 years, whatever. But some people have rather conservative, very conservative goal, and the conservative goal is what? They want to at least cover for inflation. You understand? They want to at least cover for inflation. So if you have 10K now, if you have $10,000 now, and if you put it in the bank, at least you want that return on your money would be enough, more than enough to compensate for inflation. Right? Do you understand? So the point is then, if it is an investment, like any investment, so now let's think about this. I'm going to use, what was our inflation in our example? 10%. And what was our interest rate? 1%. This is clearly a very bad, poor investment because this 1% interest rate cannot compensate for this 10% inflation. Okay, everyone is clear about that? So here's the idea. Here's the thing. Even if you are a conservative investor who don't expect, who are not very ambitious and who don't expect such a huge return, at least the return on investment, in this case, interest rate is the return on investment. You want this to be greater than inflation, at least, or equal, at least. Right? So in other words, if this is 10% as well, if this is 10%, if the interest rate is 10%, then 1 year later you will have that's called future value 1. 1 year later you will have 11K in the bank, right? And this is nominal 11K, nominally nominal. And let's say there has been, normally, think about it. If inflation was zero, if there has been zero inflation, right? 11K will, how much can 11K can buy? I mean, compared to the previous year, how much can 11K buy compared to previous year? Is someone saying something? It's very faint.
I
I
was
can
saying,
barely hear any. Hmm?
I was saying, anyway, it doesn't look like that much has changed. So I wouldn't say you could buy that much more. I wouldn't say.
Um, I'm sorry, I cannot make out what you're saying. You might need to turn up the volume on your. I don't know how. It depends on your computer microphone volume. You might need to uh, raise it. Anybody else? Now, one thing you can tell is that at least, what if what if inflation is 0%, right? But then, um, with 11K, you can buy more 10% more than what you could buy a year ago, because at a year ago, your principal was 10K. A year ago, the principal was 10K, and now, so you have a year later, you have 11K in your bank account. If you would withdraw this money and spend it, you can afford to buy as much as what 10K could buy, right? In other words, your purchasing power increased exactly by 10%, right? If there has been no inflation. Think of it this way. 10K represents, a year ago, you had 10K, and a year ago, a bottle of Coke was $1. How many bottles of Coke can you buy with 10K?
10K.
Anyone? Someone said?
10K.
Yeah, exactly. 10,000 bottles. Yeah, 10,000 bottles, right? Or 10K bottles. I mean, usually, you say 10K for money only, but 10,000 bottles, because each bottle is, $1. 1 year later, without any inflation, 1 year later, with 11K, there was no inflation. So the bottle of Coke still cost how much?
$1.
$1. Then with 11K, how many bottles of Coke can you buy?
11,000.
Yeah, 11,000. Okay. In other words, the purchasing power of your money, right, is still the same. The purchasing power of your money is still the same, because $1 can buy one bottle, right? But let's say inflation has been 10%, let's say. And who gave me that answer?
Yang Song.
Okay, Ian. So I'm going to give you another 0.5 for that. Now, what if there has been 10% inflation during this period? 10%. Now, 1 year ago, with 10K, yes, you could buy 10,000 bottles of Coke. Now, there has been inflation, 10% inflation. Inflation means, on average, the price level went up by 10%. So individual items may be different, right? The price level, the price of individual items may have, increased by different degrees, by different magnitude. But on average, if everything become 10% more expensive, then 1 year later, with you have, in the bank, you have 11K because the interest rate is 10%. Now, how many bottles of Coke can you buy now? How many bottles of Coke can you buy now? Is this so difficult?
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000. 10,000. Right? 10,000 bottles. Why? Because Coke is now $1.10. Right? Coke is $1.10 now. Because the price level went up 10%. Coke is now $1.10. So with 11,000, you can only buy 10K bottles. You can say, oh, it's still 10,000 bottles. It's still 10,000 bottles. But actually, the purchasing power of your money went down because with 11,000, you should be able to buy 11K bottles, but you can buy only 10,000 bottles. So the purchasing power of your money has gone down. This is the effect of inflation. Of course, we know all that. But so inflation eroded the purchasing power of our money. But then that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, even if you are a very conservative investor, at least you want this to be, at least you want the interest rate to be greater than the inflation. Pi is the symbol for inflation in macroeconomics context, right? But pi is used as a symbol for profit in microeconomics context. I'm going to get to that later. So this is why I said it's a very poor, putting money in the bank is a very poor investment when we consider inflation. Make sense? All righty. So any questions so far? Any questions? Any questions so far? Let's say it's 1:05, so I think it's a good time to take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll return at 1:15 then. 1:15. All right? Everyone, you heard me?
All right, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 1:15. All right? All right, we're back. We're back. So, continuing with our discussion, right? So the Fed funds rate. Okay, we weren't talking about the Fed funds rate. I just habitually just Fed funds rate just came out of my mouth. But so think about it. The interest rate. Uh, so in this sense, if you think about it, the interest rate is the bottom line because it's the bottom line of all return on investment, right? Because interest rate is risk free, right? And another risk-free rate is treasury return on the treasury bill, 1-year treasury bill, which is also an interest. When we say interest rate, it doesn't refer to only the bank interest rate because interest is what you pay on the borrowing, right? Treasury bill, treasury securities is borrowing by the federal government. So one interest they pay on the 1-year treasury, 1 year is short term, and it's not only the interest, it's also the capital gains or capital loss associated with that treasury bill. But we're gonna get there later. So for now, we'll just we'll just stay focused on the bank interest rate as the bottom line or the baseline of all return on investment. Okay, and because interest rate, bank interest rate, I mean interest rate on the CD or savings account is the risk-free return on the money. Nothing can be safer than this. And as I said, all investments involve some degrees of risk. So if bank interest rate has no risk, it will have to be the lowest return of all. And as the risk goes up, the return will have to be higher because return is the compensation for taking the risk, right? So that's why interest rate is why interest rate is important because all returns will basically stack up. All kinds of return on investment will have to stack up on the interest rate as the bottom. Now, but when we say interest rate, it sounds very simple, but actually there are many ways we can classify or look at the interest rate. One way we look at it is whether we are lender or borrower, right? Now, if we are lending to the bank, I told you, bank becomes a borrower. Passively, bank becomes borrower. And in this case, they will pay, and they will pay something like 0.1% interest rate on the savings. This rate is called borrowing rate. Okay, we are lending, and the bank is borrowing, and the interest they pay on this borrowing is called borrowing rate. In other words, from their perspective, calling it borrowing rate or lending rate depends on the banking industry's perspective. Okay, so although we are lending, it's not called and we get 0.1% on our savings. And we don't call that lending rate, it's called borrowing rate from the bank's perspective. Okay, and then vice versa. Lending rate is when the banks lend. So if you think about it, when we put our money in the bank, it's regardless of who you are, it's just flat 0.1% across the board, right? Flat 0.1%. I mean, if you put your money in the CD, maybe 1% or 0.5. I'll have to look where the CD rates are currently, but it's not even 1% if I remember correctly, because Fed funds rate is still, like 0.25. There's no reason, but anyway, the point is, the lending rate and borrowing rate, there will be a difference between the lending rate and borrowing rate, because as I said, no matter who you are, you'll just get, when you put your $10,000 in the bank, you'll get just about, 0.1%. No matter who you are, regardless of your, most of all, credit score, right? And then, but when you are borrowing from the bank, when you are the borrower, then the interest rate will vary depending on who you are. Okay? Does that make sense? Why? Because when you are putting your money in the bank is the borrower, and the bank calls the shot. What interest rate that they pay, what interest they pay, the bank calls the shot. And if you are the borrower, of course, still the bank calls the shot. But when you borrow money, let's say you borrow $100,000 from the bank, what's going to be your interest rate? It's going to be it's going to depend on your credit score. If you have excellent credit score, it will be just about only about 3%. It will be just about 3% or even less, because currently the I'm going to get to that. And if you have a bad credit score, it can be 10% or 15%, whatever, right? Why? First of all, credit score is an important factor in getting a loan. And since most of you are students generally don't have long credit history. So most, and you guys must be in your early 20s. And if you're in your early 20s, you don't have a long credit history. So you don't have high credit score. You'll just have, probably you'll be around, 400, 500 range.
Disagree.
What did you
I'd have
say?
to disagree with you on that one.
Well, yeah, there can be individual differences. I'm not saying everyone across the board, but basically, I don't know what your personal individual situation is, but if you're just about 20 something, early 20s, college student without long credit history, you won't have like 800 point credit score. Right? Do you have 800 point credit score?
Almost there.
Most of you, huh? What's that?
Almost there.
Almost there. Oh, good for you then. That's uh that's exceptional. That's exceptional. But um, most as I said, if you don't have long credit history, uh, most likely you won't be, above 600, right? Um, but whatever your individual and personal situation may be, and so a credit score will depend on that. The point is, if you have uh, good credit score, you are a low risk borrower to the lender, right? So your interest rate doesn't have to be high. And if you have low credit score, you are a high risk borrower to the lender. And of course, the risk we are talking about here is the default risk, right? And um, the credit scores generally come mainly from the borrowing history. And so the best way to increase your credit score is through getting some kind of loan, small, even if it is a small loan, right? And usually it's for young people, the loan kind of loan that you will get is probably, like car loan. Car loans, still, I mean, even if it is, a $20,000 loan, or and if you have been, owning the car for like the last uh, 3 years, 5 years, and you have paid off your payment on the car for the last 5 years, that will be a, already sufficient time frame to build good credit score. Of course, provided that you have never missed a payment, you made all the payments always on time, regularly, on regular basis, then you build your credit score. But that's another story. So let me not dwell on that too much. So the point is, so when you borrow, interest rates vary. I mean, this is the interest rate you have to pay because you're the borrower, and it can range anywhere between like 3% to like 15%, depending on your credit score. But when you put your money in the bank, the interest you earn is very mediocre, like 0.1%. So think about it. You are a prime borrower, prime category. The prime rate, I said, if you have excellent credit score, your rate will be, when you borrow money, your rate will be somewhere around 3%. And that's called prime rate. Prime rate is what prime rate is literally, the rate that is given to the highest quality borrower. In other words, highest credit score. So it will be, and conventionally, it's not a rule that's etched in stone like 10 Commandments, but conventionally, the prime rate is like 3% above Fed funds rate. And since the Fed funds rate is 0 to 0.25% now, it will be about 3% or 3.25. So even if you're a prime borrower with excellent credit score, you'll still pay about 3% interest. And then when you put your money in the bank, you just get like 0.1%. So this difference between the borrowing rate and lending rate is called the spread, right? There is, in this example, there is about 2.9% spread, and the spread is the main source of revenue of the bank. So that's one way to look at the interest rate. Another way to look at the interest rate is the nominal rate versus real interest rate. And we already talked about this. Here in this example, nominal means, we already know, in name, only in name. So remember, when you put your $10,000 in the bank and a year later, if it is 11K, that means the nominal interest rate was 10%, right? But if there has been 10% inflation during this time, the 10% inflation exactly canceled out. It exactly wiped out that 10% interest. So with $11,000, you can still buy only 10,000 bottles of Coke. 1 year ago, with $10,000, you could buy 10,000 bottles of Coke. So in other words, although nominally your money is 10% more, you have 10% more money nominally, but effectively, you can buy the same number of real goods, right? So that is called, that is what's called real. Real means literally so here's the thing. I stands for nominal interest rate, and the nominal interest rate is real interest rate. R stands for real interest rate plus inflation. Okay. So here, or vice versa, I can put it then. I can also put it this way. Real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus inflation. Now think about it. If nominal interest rate is 10%, right? And if inflation is 10%, what does that mean? Real interest rate is effectively, real interest rate is zero. In other words, right? Nominal interest rate is completely wiped out by inflation. Then there is the real interest rate is zero, which means exactly you are no better, although nominally you have $11,000 now, you are effectively no better off than a year ago when you had $10,000, because in real goods, you can still buy 10,000 bottles, right? You're no better off. On the other hand, suppose if the, think about it. If there was no inflation, that simply means, right? If inflation was zero, real interest rate is 10%. Nominal interest rate and real interest rate are both equal. And then that's the case where with 11K you could buy 11,000 bottles of Coke because there was no inflation, right? But this is the important thing. Here's the important thing. What if what if nominal interest rate was 10% and inflation was 15%? What's the real interest rate? Anyone?
-5%.
Yeah, -5%. Yes. And who was that?
Yeah.
Okay, Yang. Yang, yeah, you got another 0.5 for answering that. That's already 2 points today. 2 points today alone. Yeah. Then -5%. What does this mean? What does negative real interest rate mean? Now, first of all, someone was trying to say something.
Maybe the money is more expensive than before.
Money is more expensive? No, actually, when there is an inflation, money loses purchasing power, so money becomes less
right?
expensive.
Yeah, sorry.
Or less valuable, right? Money becomes less valuable. Money loses purchasing power when there is inflation. Money becomes less valuable, right? Money loses value. But first of all, can you imagine what negative interest rate is? Can you imagine a negative interest rate? Negative nominal interest rate, even. Now, if was someone trying to say?
I was about to ask a question.
Yeah, you had a question. Okay, who is this? Kyle. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was thinking, like, in a negative interest rate situation, wouldn't they be encouraging? Never mind, because this not. I don't think you were referring to like banks as well. I was thinking negative interest rates in terms of loans and so forth for a second. That wouldn't really happen. I was just saying hypothetically.
I'm Kyle. I'm afraid I can barely make out what you're saying. Did anybody understand what Kyle was saying? Kyle, there probably it's the connection or your microphone, but it's you're breaking up from time to time, and it's kind of faint, right? So if you can summarize, in the chat box, I would really appreciate it. But anybody else?
Does that mean the negative interest rate means the bank will pay the interest to the borrower, not the lender? It's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, you're right, Ian. I'm gonna have to give you 1 point for that answer. Think about it. What that means is, the lender will have to pay interest to the borrower, not the other way around. Normally, when you borrow money, the borrower pays the interest, isn't that right? The borrower pays the interest, but if the interest rate is negative, instead of the borrower paying interest, the lender pays interest. But is this possible? Is this even possible? Not in nominal interest rate, this is not going to happen. Why? It's like you can think of it this way. Under what circumstances would borrower pay, would lender pay interest? It's actually, paying fee. I mean, you cannot expect a bank when you borrow money from the bank, you will have to pay interest to the bank, but the bank is paying interest to you. Right? And when you are putting money in the bank will have to pay interest to you under normal circumstances, but you pay interest for putting your money in the bank. Then you might say, who's going to do that? Yeah, nobody's going to do that. Why would I put my money in the bank and still pay interest? In reality, it only happens under a special circumstance. Under what circumstance? Have you heard of Swiss bank or offshore banking? Swiss bank or offshore banking? Who opens Swiss bank account? Who opens Swiss bank account?
The rich are criminals.
Right, the rich and the criminals. Right? Why the rich? And the rich and criminals both. I mean, it's an intersection. Yeah, why? Because they have, they want to hide their illegal stash. Isn't that right? They want to hide their illegal stash from tax authorities. And who said that? Stephen, right? Stephen, I'm going to give you another 0.5.
Sure.
Yes. It's tax evasion, right? They don't want their so in that case, the bank is providing some service, so it makes sense. It makes sense. Even if I'm paying the fee, I will put if I'm rich and I have, I don't. If some criminals are hiding their stash in Swiss bank, so they pay fee. But not ordinary people. Ordinary people would not put money in the bank and pay fee for that. But if the nominal interest rate is negative, that's what is happening exactly. And so no ordinary people wouldn't do that. Good people wouldn't do that. But negative real interest rate is possible no matter whether you're a criminal or rich or whether you're good, nice, ordinary people. Negative real interest rate can happen because of inflation. I just showed you an example. The bank pays you 10%. The bank pays you 10% nominal interest rate. So if your principal, that means your principal, again, 10K, and 1 year later, it will be 11K. This is nominal dollars, nominally. But can you buy as much as what 11K could buy a year ago? No. Why? Because inflation was 15%. So what is the real purchasing power of 11K? Then you'll just need to then the real future value at time 1 will be 11K divided by 1.15. Okay, and then let's try it. Clear. How do I clear this? Yeah, clear. 11,000 divided by 1.15. So in real terms, in 9,565 to 2. Okay, so that means, what does that mean? You have nominally $11,000 now because you had 10% interest, and then, but there has been 15% inflation. So what he can buy, everything is 15% more expensive. That means a bottle of Coke is now $1.15. Then with $11,000, all you can buy is only 9,565 what 9,565 dollars could buy. So in Coke is $1.15. It would be exactly 9,565 bottles now. That's why it is called real. Real means, in real goods, right? So this is, and you might wonder why, how do I, why I make adjustment by dividing by 1 plus. You have noticed you divide the nominal dollars by 1 plus inflation, because that's, inflation is what? Inflation is the growth rate of the price level. Inflation is the growth rate of the price level. So it's just like, remember, in the house value example, right? Price of the value of the house at time t plus 1 is price of the house at time t times 1 plus growth rate in year 1. Remember that? Right? So it's just the same thing. So then if you want to find what, suppose this is the unknown. Suppose, so you want to find what the price at time t was, then what do? You'll have to divide pt plus 1 by 1 plus g1, right? Now think about it. It's the same thing. Coke, a bottle of Coke, price of Coke, at time t, let's say. Price of Coke at time t was $1. And there has been 15% inflation, right? 1 year later, price at time t plus 1, it is $1.15. It's going to be $1.15 because it exactly, from this to this, what happened? PT, what happened here is PT times 1 plus inflation, right? And voila, $1.15. So if you want to adjust this price by inflation, adjust it for inflation, then you would have to divide it by 1 plus pi, 1 plus inflation. right? That's the same thing. Now, so this is a very important concept. Why? Think about it. When there is an inflation, right? I mean, so I'll have to keep, I guess. Real interest rate is a very important concept because inflation reduces, inflation erodes, actually. Mitigates. Inflation mitigates the interest rate that, interest that you have to pay. And think about it. Any positive inflation, inflation that is, inflation that is, there are three possibilities, right? Think about it. As I said, interest rate can be greater than inflation, or it can be equal to inflation, or it can be less than inflation. But, and I'm not going to write like this anymore because I can write it like, remember, this captures all three cases, right? Interest rate being greater than inflation, interest rate being equal to inflation, interest rate being less than, right? Inflation. But under all cases, right? One thing is for sure, inflation mitigates interest, right? Makes sense? So, when there is inflation, suppose, think about it. You borrowed from the borrower's perspective. From the borrower's perspective. Suppose you borrowed $10,000 a year ago. You borrowed $10,000 a year ago, but and you have to pay it back now, a year later, and there has been 10% inflation. There has been 10% inflation, or there has been 15% inflation. Let's think about these two cases. There has been 10% inflation. You borrowed $10,000. Now, nominally, you pay back $11,000. You pay back $11,000. But then the burden of paying back this $11,000 is much less when there has been 10% inflation. Why? Because although you're paying back nominally $11,000, the value of that $11,000 is much less. We calculated it before. When there was 10% inflation, then the purchasing power of this 11K is only like 9,090 something, right? Remember that when we calculated, it was 9,090 something. So in other words, as when you pay back, the burden is much less. And suppose the inflation was even 15%. Inflation was even 15%. You have to pay back Yeah, there's something. How could this be 11K when you divide 11K? What I was saying was, if you borrow 10K and with 10% interest rate, 1 year later you're paying back 11K, but inflation has been 10%, so it wipes out completely. So although you're nominally paying back 11K, the burden is like just paying back only 10K. So from the borrower's perspective, this is a good thing. And if you borrowed 10K at 0%, even with no interest rate, even with no interest rate, right? So you will be nominally paying back 10K, but uh, since the purchasing power of 10K is only like 9,090 something, yeah, much less burden. And then when interest rate was 10%, you'll pay back 11K. That's nominally 11K, but inflation eroded more than 10%. So it's like, although you're not paying back 11K, it's like paying back only 9,566 or 65. So think about it. When there is an inflation and real interest rate is mitigated by the inflation, this is a good news for the borrower. Isn't it right? This is a good news for the borrower. And if this is the case, the borrowers can increase borrowing. The borrowers can increase borrowing. This is why, and if the borrowers can increase borrowing, this stimulates the economy. You might wonder, isn't borrowing a bad thing? No, borrowing is not necessarily a bad thing. Borrowing, if you borrow money to go on a cruise, or borrow money to party, or borrow money to go on a vacation, that's a bad thing. It's a stupid thing, actually. But if you borrow money to finance a project that will generate lucrative project that will generate huge income in the future, that's a legitimate borrowing. Basically, think about it. All the businesses, and especially the borrowing I'm talking about is the business borrowing. When businesses borrow, they borrow to invest in growth. They borrow to invest in expansion, their capacity expansion. Right? You understand? Businesses borrow to expand their production capacity. And if their production capacity is expanded, then their output will increase. As their output increases, their revenue will increase. Not only that, as their output increases, their market share will also expand. So this is why businesses borrow. And if businesses borrow more, that will stimulate the economy, because as the businesses increase their output production, right? Production capacity or output capacity, it will hire more resources, more raw materials, more labor, more capital. They will have positive feedback throughout the economy. There's a ripple effect, positive ripple effect that goes out throughout the economy. So the economy will grow. So in other words, this is the main reason. Think about it. Why is the Federal Reserve keeping the Fed funds rate at 0%? Why? Of course, next year, it's already 2022. This year, they are saying the Fed will raise interest rate at least 3 times. but they have held the Fed funds rate at 0%. And the reason is to make it easier to borrow, to make it easier for the businesses to borrow so that the economy can expand. Make sense? And also, this is why the real interest rate is important. And inflation, I said, is not necessarily a bad thing. A moderate inflation is, basically inflation around 2%, right? Which is basically set by the Federal Reserve. I mean, a guideline. 2% inflation is like, Fed's target inflation, because 2% inflation is a inflation that is um, due to strong demand, and it's a sign of vibrant economy, and it helps to reduce the real interest rate, so it will promote borrowing by the businesses. Okay, so I think this is another, it's 203. I should have, so let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 2:15. Okay, let's take a 10 minute and come back at 2:15. Okay. All right. All right, we're back. We're back. So I wonder if you have. I sent out this notification or announcement about the ROI concept check. Everyone has received it?
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah. Is it
Um,
Darlene?
yes,
Yeah.
it's Eileen. Is it possible to complete the exam tomorrow night?
Yes. Look, see, the window is open until Friday the 7th.
Okay.
So all you need is just pick 2 hours within this window. So you can finish it on the today is what 5th, right? Tomorrow is 6th. Yeah, you can finish it tomorrow. No
Okay. Thank
problem.
you so
I'm
much.
just yeah. I just gave you a 3-day window so you can pick the most convenient 2 hours for you. Okay? Alrighty. But it has to be done. It has to be submitted by uh, the 7th, right? Midnight, the 11:20, 11:59. And don't please get a head start. Don't start late. And then some people start at 11 p.m. and then or 11:30 p.m. and then they run into some technical issue and then email me at 11:45. Professor, the suddenly, it kicked me out or I lost connection or there's nothing I can do at that point, right? Listen, and at 11:45 p.m. I must be in bed, isn't that right? I may not be watching my email 24/7. So please get a head start. And if you run into any, for example, you lost connection, so you were halfway through and you lost connection. So um, uh, when you lost, and the answers were not saved, so you lost everything. I mean, if something like that happened early on, like by the 6th, right? And then if you email me, I can at least discover that email within 24 hours and I can take action within 24 hours, maybe sooner. But if you send me email, if you start at 11:30 p.m. on the 7th and email me at 11:45, I have a problem, then there's nothing I can do at the time. Nothing can be done at the time. So please, um, this is a sensible thing, right? To get a head start. Okay. All righty. And someone wrote something. I'm gonna have to. Is it multiple? It's multiple. I believe I said this about talked about this before. It's a combination of multiple choice and math, short answer math questions. So it's pretty much like that. All righty. So we'll need to. It's already 2:19, so let me wrap it up. So here, um, we already talked about why real interest rate is um, uh, an important factor in finance because it's not just in finance but in macroeconomics. It's basically
Professor,
uh,
do we have time to go back to the first table?
say that again.
Do we have enough time to go back to the first table, the
First
Excel sheet?
table. Yeah. You have a question about that? Yeah. Yeah.
No, you said we were gonna go back and you were gonna
Oh,
explain it
no.
in depth some more.
Not today. Not today. I mean, uh, think about it. We have, I believe it is almost 2:20. So maybe another time, but not today. because we'll need to wrap it up. So, and then the third way they look at the interest rate is, I mean, this is technical side. There is not a simple interest rate and interest rate compound, and we know what compound interest rate is because we've seen the examples of in the house value example in that Excel. Basically, we know what compounding is. So in other words, compounding is basically the way you earn interest, the way the interest is accumulating, the way the interest is accruing on your principal. So it's basically this. Future value at time n is the principal times 1 plus r raised to n. What is this? Wasn't it like price of the house in 2016, which is the price of the house 2005 times 1 plus average annualized growth rate, right? Raised to 11. Right? Remember this? This is basically what compounding is. Of course, actual house values, actual annual growth rates were all uneven, but if we find the average of all those uneven growth rates, we can, it all becomes, all those P 2005 times 1 plus G1 times 1 plus G2 times 1 plus G3 all the way to 1 plus G11, that GI will all simply become just without any time subscript, just a number because it's the average, G. And then because there are 11 terms that were multiplied, it just becomes 1 plus G raised to 11, right? That's basically what compounding is. And this is how in the capital market, the financial market breaks down into two categories: money market and capital market. Money market is basically short-term borrowing and lending. And in short-term means under 1 year. So in the money market, the way the interest accrues, it follows the simple interest rate. But in the capital market, right, meaning lending for long term, over 1 year, or investing for more than 1 year, the way the return or interest rate accrues follows this pattern. Okay, that's compounding. Okay, but then if it is simple interest rate, how does that work? How does the simple interest rate work then? Okay, the way the simple interest rate works is like, make it bigger, just a little bigger. Okay, the way the simple interest rate works. So let me give you an example. First of all, if it is compounding, right? In the long term, in the capital market, right? Suppose N is 2, R is 10%, of course, and then P 10K. So that means if you put your 10K in a bank that pays 10% interest rate for 2 years, what's going to be there in your account 2 years later. In other words, that's called FV2. Okay, what's going to be there? You might think, oh, isn't it, $12,000 then? Because, it's 10% a year, so 1,000, and 2 years, so 2,000. No, actually, it's not going to be 12,000. It's going to be actually $12,010. Why? Now think about it. It follows this rule. 10K times 1.1 squared. Okay, and if you do that, you can simply use the calculator, but believe me, because we're running out of time. But it's not a difficult thing. 10,000 times 1.1 raised to, right? Yeah, 12,100. 12,100. And why? Of course, because of, but think about it. But let's start with future value 1. That means, how much money will be there in your account at the end of year 1. At the end of year 1, we all know you have the principal of 10K. And there's 10K. Principal of 10K. And then there will be interest of 1K because it's 10%. That 1K is simply what? Principal times interest rate, principal times interest rate, right? In other words, P times R. And this is called interest, right? So then it's going to be, of course, 11K. And everyone knows that. Oh. I used my finger and then, okay. Then we can factor out the common factor. The common factor is 10K, principal, right? This is principal. We can factor out the principal. This one, if you factor out, this one will be 1, and this one will be just R, right? So that's what's at the end of year 1, 11K. Now, at the beginning of year 2, then think about it. We break it down. And think about it. Future value 2, what's going to be at the end of year 2? But at the beginning of year 1, at the beginning of year 2, I'm sorry, at the beginning of year 2, what's going to be there at the beginning of year 2? How much money is there at the beginning of year 2? Anyone? How much is there? How much is sitting there in your account at the beginning of year 2? Anyone? This is really a point giver, but nobody is.
Is it 11,000?
11,000. Yeah, who said that? 11,000. Who
Randy.
said that? Randy. Okay, Randy, you get 0.25 for that. I mean 0.5. Yes. Did I say 0.25? I said 0.5. Yeah, there will be 11K sitting there, which is like the principal at the beginning of year 2. Principal is 10K, but at the beginning of year 2, 11K is sitting there. So it's like principal for year 2, and it's going to earn 10% interest again, which is 10% of this will be 1.1K, right? 1.1K. So what's the total going to be? $12.1K or 12.1K or $12,000 and 100K, right? So this is why. And then if I rewrite it, what is this? This is FV1, isn't that right? And then this is FV1 times R. So you factor out the common factor. If you factor out the common factor, it's FV1, and this term is going to be just 1 because you factored out, and then this will be this. Yeah, just like this, we got it like that. But what is the definition of FV1? What is the definition of FV1? When I say definition, it's not verbal definition. It's not verbal definition because I don't like wordiness. Verbal definition, that's not what I mean. But we already mathematically defined what FV1 is. Anyone? We defined mathematical.
Is it final value or future value?
But I said, didn't you hear me? I said, I don't mean verbal definition. When I ask for a definition, I always mean mathematical definition. And we already gave mathematical definition of FV1. So anyone?
The first year the person could get.
Again, that's a verbal definition. That's not what I asked for. We defined it mathematically. What's the mathematical definition of FV1? Anyone?
Is it 11K?
No, that's not mathematical. Okay, that's number, but that's not the algebraic definition. Okay, that's not algebraic definition of FE1. What is the algebraic definition of FE1? And I never ask for verbal definition because verbiage is worthless. Verbiage is actually in economics and finance or in physics. Verbiage is pariah. Come on, guys, we have already defined it. Didn't we define it here? FV1 is equal to this, which is equal to this. That's the definition of FV1. Isn't that right? Everyone, isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then can we not replace this? Can we not replace it by the definition of FV1? Yes, we can. So it's P times 1 plus R, and then times 1 plus R here, right? Then this becomes what? This becomes P times 1 plus
R squared.
R squared. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
That's why, right? That's why I already did it like this, right? And that's not something new. This is something you already saw in the that house value example. Okay. All righty. It's already 2:36. So the class is already class is dismissed. And if you have any questions, you can hang around. As I said, and someone is, someone wants the office hour with me, so I'll be, without turning off anything, I'll go into office hour. But if you have any questions, you can ask, right? Otherwise, I will see you guys. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you guys tomorrow again at 12. All right? So take care, everyone.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good one.
Thank you, Professor.
All right,
Thank you, Professor.
too.
Thank you, Professor.
All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. All righty. So yeah. Yang, you wanted Malika, you have something to say?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know that we have classes every day from Monday to Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to attend all the classes every day except for Friday for now, and I just want to let you know about it because but I'm gonna be in the class. I will be coming and attending, but I'm just letting you know that on Friday I actually have work that starts from 10 to 5.
Yeah. Okay, so
I'm going to try to attend the class during my break. But if anything, if I'm gonna come a little late or come a little late, yeah, I just want to let you know that there's a reason why I'm coming late on that day.
oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I understand. Don't forget to sign into the
The
today's
discussion
forum
board?
because discussion board
Alright,
because you need, as long as you have your digital footprint there, then a physical proof of attendance, that will count. And I understand you may not, constantly be in the collaborate session, but I mean, at your own time, you can, I will update. I update, a live session of the day every day
Yes, I
after the
noticed
class, so
you
you can
post the
follow,
recording.
right? Mm-hmm. All righty.
All right, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so
And
Friday only, right?
yes,
Friday
it's
only.
it's
There are
only
only three
Fridays.
Fridays. Only 3 Fridays. Isn't that
Yes,
right? Only
yes.
3 Fridays. All righty. All righty.
Thank you so much, Professor, for understanding, and
You're
have a great day.
welcome. You're welcome. You too. You too. Okay.
Hello,
All
Professor.
righty. You have a question,
Oh,
Yang?
so I finished the exam, but I did something wrong in the exam, and I would like to discuss them with you. But I think maybe you are tired now. I wrote an email to your email address. Maybe would you prefer to discuss it verbally right now or write down in the email later? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it by email.
Okay.
But you already submitted. You already submitted the first test. I mean, the practice test.
Yes, I did it this morning.
Why did you? Why didn't you wait? I mean, yeah, you could, but once you get started, then you'll have to finish it within 2 hours. So
Yes,
you could
and
have waited a little.
I have some questions about some of the questions. So I wrote an email about what I thought in the exam. So could you please
Oh, you already sent an email?
yes,
Or
once
you
I
did already?
yeah.
Okay.
So once I finish that, I send you an email. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you
I
could
will.
check later. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will reply to
Mm-hmm.
your email. It looks like you haven't yet. I don't see any new. Oh, yeah, there's one. There it is. Okay.
Yep, but
Yeah.
yes, just check it later. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sure.
And thank you for giving us the detailed lecture today. And
All
I will
right,
work
no
hard.
problem. No
Mhm.
problem. My pleasure. All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care now. Take care
Have
now.
a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.